everyone. Today we will be dealing with mitral regurgitation. As we all know, mitral regurgitation is the most common cardiac manifestation of acute rheumatic fever, and it is one of the most common it is one of the most common valvular heart disease in the entire world. So first we will be dealing with what is a mitral valve apparatus. Mitral valve apparatus basically has got five components. This first is the mitral annulus, the surrounding area, and then you have got the anterior mitral leaflet is the bigger. Bear with my drawing; it won't be much good. And this is the posterior mitral leaflet, and this is the annulus. This is the view of the mitral valve. So this annulus is connected with to the two papillary muscles, namely the posteromedial papillary muscle and the anterolateral papillary muscles, and these two are connected by the means of chordae tendineae. So this is the myocardium, and this is the papillary muscle, and this is the chordae. So this is the basic mitral valve apparatus. Lesion in any of these five components can result in mitral regurgitation. This can be classified based on their causes. First, we will be dealing with acute mitral regurgitation. So acute mitral regurgitation is completely different from a chronic mitral regurgitation in the fact that it has got an entirely different set of causes. It has got a different set of clinical features, investigations, treatment, everything is completely different. It is a core medical emergency, acute mitral regurgitation. But in a case of chronic MR, it is not that severe. It is more of an established rheumatic heart disease. First, we will be dealing with the causes for acute MR. Acute MR can be because of ACS. That's right. An inferior valve myocardial infarction, because due to a right coronary artery occlusion, will decrease the blood supply to the posteromedial papillary muscle. The fact is that posteromedial papillary muscle has got single blood supply, whereas the anterolateral papillary muscle has got dual blood supply. So the posteromedial papillary muscle is more prone for infarction. When it undergoes infarction, it results in acute mitral regurgitation. This acute mitral regurgitation the patient can develop into acute pulmonary edema and can have high mortality rate. The second most common is the infective endocarditis. An infective endocarditis the vegetation can erode the underlying valve or the underlying chordae and can result in acute mitral regurgitation. Third cause is the trauma. Trauma can also result in acute mitral regurgitation. And fourth one, what is called as an acute on chronic MR, is a known case of, say, mitral valve prolapse, who has got some degeneration of the mitral valve. In that patient, when the chordae tendineae undergoes rupture, this results in acute MR, a chronic MR, coding in acute on chronic MR. Chordal rupture in MBPS. So these are the causes for an acute mitral regurgitation. Now we will be dealing with chronic mitral regurgitation. So chronic mitral regurgitation basically is of two types. Either it can be a primary or a secondary. Primary means it involves either the valves or the chordae. Secondary is basically involving the ventricular myocardium. It can involve the papillary muscles. Because of the LV dilatation and the annular dilatation, it goes for chronic mitral regurgitation. First, primary. Lesion in the valve plus chordae. What are the causes? It can be rheumatic heart disease, especially acute rheumatic fever. It can be mitral valve prolapse. It can be secondary to congenital heart disease. What are the congenital heart disease where you can have mitral regurgitation? It is an ostium primum atrial septal defect. There will be an atrial septal defect with a cleft in the anterior mitral leaflet, and second will be an endocardial cushion defect. This endocardial cushion defect will have ASD, VSD, MR, AR, MRTR. It is a combination of all those things. And the other causes includes trauma, radiation, These are the common cause of a chronic primary MR. A secondary MR, on the other hand, involves, as I said earlier, the myocardium, or it can involve the papillary muscle, or it can involve the annulus. So what are the causes of secondary MR? It can occur secondary to a dilated cardiomyopathy, an ischemic DCM, a patient with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a patient with a chronic atrial fibrillation leading on to an atrial enlargement that will cause annular dilatation, and secondary MR. In both here, the valves and the chordae, they appear as innocent bystanders. The main pathology is in the myocardium. When the myocardium, let's say the myocardium goes in for enlargement, the annulus of the tricuspid, all the mitral valve also goes in for enlargement. When the annulus enlarges, the approximation of the both the leaflets will be defective. So the patient can have mitral regurgitation. This can be seen in because of LV remodeling or any of the above problems. So what is a dynamic mitral regurgitation? Dynamic mitral regurgitation is a unique form of mitral regurgitation seen in a case of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. This is because in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, there will be systolic anterior motion of the anterior mitral leaflet. This systolic motion of the anterior mitral leaflet can into the LV outflow tract can produce mitral regurgitation. It is only a dynamic. So other problems, what is something called as what is MR begets MR. What is MR begets MR means a chronic mitral regurgitation leads to left atrial dilatation. Left atrial dilatation will argue to pushing of the posterior mitral valve leaflets above. This will result in increased mitral regurgitation. So MR causing more MR is what is called as MR begets MR. So now we are dealing with the pathophysiology. So what happens in mitral regurgitation? During systole, the ventricle will contract. This has to pump the blood from the left ventricle into the aorta. Because of a problem in the mitral valve, during systole, blood not only enters from LV into aorta, the blood also enters from LV into the left atrium. This can occur in two forms. If the patient is having let's say in a let's discuss this chronic MR. In chronic MR, what does heart has to do? Heart has to maintain the cardiac output somehow. So the left ventricle, some amount of blood from the left ventricle enters into the left atrium during systole. So how can it maintain the cardiac output? The heart will go for an eccentric hypertrophy. The heart will enlarge, the left ventricle will increase in its volume, because only when it is increased more volume, it can receive more from the blood from the left atrium. As we said earlier, during systole, blood from LV enters into the left atrium. Left atrium enlarges to accommodate this extra volume of blood. During the diastole, huge volume of blood moves from left atrium to left ventricle, more than what is normally seen. So the left ventricle has to accompany this large volume of blood. So it will go for eccentric dilatation. And then this will try to maintain the cardiac output for some times. Later stages, the left ventricle end diastolic volume pressure will increase. This will increase the left atrial pressure. The patient in later stages can go for pulmonary hypertension. Once the patient develops pulmonary hypertension, the right ventricle will find it difficult to pump the blood into the pulmonary artery. So the right ventricle will go for dilatation. Once the right ventricle will go for dilatation, it can result in functional TR and a right atrial dilatation. So out and out, all the four chambers of the heart can be involved. LV, LA earlier is involved earlier, RA, RV is involved later. This is the complete pathophysiology of this problem. So what is the basic difference between acute MR and a chronic MR? So the left atrium, in a case of acute MR, the left atrium will not be ready to accompany all this extra volume of blood. So what happens? Left atrium cannot accommodate this extra volume of blood. So the pressure within the left atrium increases very rapidly. When the pressure within the left atrium increases rapidly, it will be transmitted onto the pulmonary veins, which will go for the pulmonary arteries, and the patient can go for acute decompensated pulmonary edema in the form of breathlessness, full crepes or both the bases can extend anteriorly. These find something called as asymmetric pulmonary edema. This jet of beam can involve just the upper lobe pulmonary veins, resulting in a localized upper lobe pulmonary edema. That is also seen here. Whereas in the case of chronic MR, as I said earlier, left atrium dilates, so it can accommodate more volume of blood. So the patient doesn't go in for an acute increase in the pulmonary venous pressure or a pulmonary hypertension. That doesn't occur earlier. So LV failure will be more common in acute MR. It won't be that common in a chronic MR. So how does an MR patient present? Basically, any regurgitant lesion can present with palpitation. Mitral regurgitation, aortic regurgitation, any volume overload condition can present with palpitation. Any obstructive lesion can present with low cardiac output. That is a general dictum. Now, that can be symptoms because of LV failure. What are the LV failure symptoms? Dyspnea, orthopnea, PND, and the pulmonary edema in case of acute cases. This is the LV failure symptoms. Sometimes the patient can go for low output symptoms. Because the blood from the left ventricle goes into the left atrium, the amount of blood entering into the aorta will be decreased. That will be low cardiac output. That can be fatigue, weakness. These findings can be present. Then the patient, once they develop for pulmonary hypertension, and they can go for RV failure symptoms. RV failure in the form of facial puffiness, raised JVP, abdominal distension, pale edema, leg swelling, systemic venous congestion, right upper quadrant pain. All these findings can be present. The patient can go for atrial fibrillation. This is because the dilatation of left atrium results in an atrial fibrillation. So atrial fibrillation can present with palpitation or a thromboembolic manifestation or a syncope. Anything of that can be present. So examination, the S1 will be soft in the case of mitral regurgitation. Because of the defective coaptation of the leaflets, S1 will be soft. S2, there will be early closure of the aortic valve. Early closure of the aortic valve will result in an early A2. Now A2 occurs early, there will be wide splitting of the second heart sound. A2 will be early and P2 will be in the normal timing. So it is widely split. S3 can be present in both in LV because of LV dysfunction or because of the increased ventricular filling due to the more volume of blood entering from left atrium to left ventricle. And S4 this can be seen in a case of acute mitral regurgitation because of if the patient is in sinus rhythm, you can find this. In the JVP, if the patient is in atrial fibrillation, there will be absence of A wave. If the patient is in sinus rhythm, there can be prominent V wave in the left atrium. In the right atrium, the pulmonary hypertension undergoes, the patient can have prominent V wave. This is JVP findings. Then the blood pressure can be normal, but in an acute MR, there will be hypotension. The pulse volume can be normal or it can be even low in a case of acute MR. So this is the basic findings. Also, the apex will be shifted in hyperdynamic circulation. The eccentric hypertrophy will be shifted down and out. Then the hyperdynamic circulation, and there is presence of systolic thrill over the apex. Okay, now murmur. So what is the different types of murmur you can have in mitral regurgitation? First one is the classical pan-systolic murmur. Murmur that begins in the S1 continues towards the duration of the systole. It is best here in the apex. In the patient supine position with the breath held in expiration, it is best it is a pan-systolic murmur. It can be grade 3 to 6 grades can be heard. This pan-systolic murmur, if there is involvement of the anterior mitral leaflet A, it will radiate to the axilla A. The anterior mitral leaflet for the axilla. If it is the posterior mitral leaflet is involved, it can go to the base of the heart. This is one finding. The other murmur is the Seagull murmur. Seagull murmur can be seen in an acute MR because of the rupture of the chordae tendineae. Then there is another condition termed as the musical murmur. Musical murmur is seen with plain mitral leaflets. And also when you try to do Valsalva, increase what is Valsalva, you will try to increase the intra-abdominal pressure. The venous rhythm decreases, so the LV volume, the cavity volume also decreases. At that condition, the murmur decreases in intensity. Next, ECG. So basically, we understood from pathophysiology there will be left atrial enlargement, left ventricular eccentric hypertrophy, right atrial enlargement, right ventricular hypertrophy, atrial fibrillation. Just these findings will be there. The findings of LAE in the form of tau in the broad P waves in V1 and lead to right atrial enlargement in the form of tall T waves in again V1 and V2 more than 2.5 small box. Either the height is more than 2.5 small box, or there can be evidence of eccentric left ventricular enlargement or a right ventricular enlargement or a manifestation of atrial fibrillation. In atrial fibrillation, there won't be any P waves on ECG and the RR interval will be irregular and heart rate will be increased. Chest X-ray again shows the same change. Dilated LA, dilated LV. The LA dilated can form the left border of the heart and there can be LV dilatation. There can be findings of heart failure, the interstitial edema, the alveolar edema, the KLDB lines, these will be prominent. Sometimes the lateral view can show calcification of the mitral annulus in certain cases of mitral annular calcification. So this is chest X-ray. Then echo. Echo is the investigation of choice. Echo with a color flow Doppler is the investigation of choice to diagnose mitral regurgitation, because it can identify the how is the valve, how is the size of the left atrium, what is the size of the left ventricle, what is the regurgitant volume, what is the regurgitation fraction, what is the regurgitation effective regurgitant orifice, everything it can be measured. Only with the echo we can diagnose a severe MR, and that has got therapeutic implications. So what is a severe MR? Severe MR has got following findings. First one will be the regurgitation volume more than 60 ml per beat. Then regurgitation fraction is more than 50%. The effective regurgitation orifice is more than 0.4 square centimeter. The vena contracta will be more than 0.7 square centimeters. 0.4. So this is with a left atrial dilatation. This is the what is called a severe mitral regurgitation. Then you can go for functional capacity. You have to assess the functional capacity of the patient. So you do a bed resting echo. Then I advise the patient to do exercise. Then post exercise, you have to do an echo. Then you can assess the difference in their regurgitant volume, the pulmonary artery pressure, or the presence of any atrial fibrillation. This could be picked up. Now, management. Medical management. So medical management, you have to just see the complication. First complication is the AFib, atrial fibrillation. You have to go for rate control or rhythm control depending upon the other factors. Rate control in the form of beta blocker or a calcium channel blocker, or beta blockers CCBs are most commonly used, or in the rhythm control in case of lecanemab, Incamab, ibutaline, this can be used for rhythm control. And you have to go for anticoagulation. Anticoagulation in MR, remember, you can use both warfarin or a newer anticoagulant, rivaroxaban or apixaban. But in the case of mitral stenosis or a prosthetic mitral valve, only warfarin is approved. The other two, the newer anticoagulants are not been preferred in those cases. You can still, if the patient, if it is a new onset AF, you can still try cardioversion, a pharmacological cardioversion or an electrical cardioversion if the patient is hemodynamically unstable. If the hemodynamic unstable, cardioversion is the treatment of choice. Then you go for IE prophylaxis. If the patient is having a previous history of infective endocarditis, or the patient is then you can go for infective endocarditis prophylaxis. Then secondary MR. Secondary MR should be managed just like managing any cardiac failure. The guideline directed medical therapy. Start the patient with ACE inhibitors, with the diuretics. If there is no response, you can add a beta blocker. If there is no response, you can then add beta blocker is usually the carvedilol, or metoprolol, or bisoprolol. Diuretics can be loop diuretics or thiazide diuretics. ACE inhibitors, the usual enalapril, the ramipral, they can be tried. If they are not response, if they are intolerant, you can go for hydralazine plus nitrates. Intolerance to these things, either hydralazine plus nitrates can be tried. If you still the patient doesn't settle with these three drugs, you can go for an aldosterone antagonist. The patient is still symptomatic, The patient is in sinus rhythm with heart rate of more than 150 beats per minute. You can try heart rate more than 100 beats per minute. You can try Ivabradine. If nothing of these sorts works, then you have to go for cardiac resuscitation therapy. This is the biventricular pacing that can be done in a patient with a heart failure who is having some bundle branch block. The white QRS complex can try this cardiac resuscitation therapy. Finally, heart transplantation is the end treatment. You can also go for ICD implantation. If the patient is having risk of sudden cardiac death, then you can try ICD implantation. This is basic management of cardiac failure that should be tried in primary MR. If the patient is again in secondary MR, the patient is symptomatic in secondary MR, you can again take him for surgery. Then, when do you take the patient? How do you manage acute MR? Acute MR, as I said, it is a medical emergency. You have to reduce the preload as well as the afterload. Preload is reduced with the help of diuretics. Afterload has to be reduced with the help of sodium nitroprusside. You have to maintain the blood pressure. Take the patient for surgery. Surgery is the treatment of choice. Now, what are the indications for surgery in a chronic MR? Which patient have to? Any symptomatic patient. There is of severe MR. You can take the patient for surgery. There is asymptomatic patient. Then you have to go for ejection fraction. The ejection fraction is less than 60. You have to take the patient for surgery. If the patient is having pulmonary hypertension, then severe, the pulmonary pressure is 150 millimeters of mercury, then you have to take the patient for surgery. Recent onset atrial fibrillation. Then also you can take the patient for surgery. A patient with a ventricular LV dilatation and LV end systolic diameter more than 40 millimeters, then you can take the patient for surgery. Any patient with a progressive worsening on yearly echo, then you can take the patient for surgery. This is the surgery. So what type of surgery? This is the indication for surgery. Symptomatic severe MR, asymptomatic with a low EF. EF of less than 60 is itself surgery, because MR is a case where the ejection fraction is usually higher, up to 70% with the EF. If it's less than 60, you can try with a severe MR, pulmonary hypertension, atrial fibrillation, an enlarged LV installed diameter more than 40 mm, and a progressive worsening on the periodic echo monitoring. So what surgery? Always go for mitral valve repair. Mitral valve repair is preferred over replacement. This is because the replacement has got high risk of you have to anticoagulate the patient for a long period of time. Surgical mortality is very high. So we'll go for repair. Repair involves this valvuloplasty, the valvuloplasty with an annuloplasty with an undersized rigid ring. They can be tried in most of these patients. The other option is a transcatheter mitral valve repair. It is done with the use of mitra clip, which is used to holds both the anterior and posterior mitral leaflets in the middle, but there is some amount of mitral regurgitation. It can be done in patients who are very frail, who are got high risk for surgical complications. There you can try transcatheter cord replacement. The other surgeries can be done for atrial fibrillation, which is refractory. You can go for Mace procedure. You have to scar the left atrium, or you can go for radiofrequency ablation of the pulmonary veins. Yeah. Now summing up. There are two groups: acute MR, chronic MR. Acute MR following an MI or infected endocarditis, the patient presenting sudden onset breathlessness, palpitation, and acute pulmonary edema-like presentation with the early systolic murmur and the mitral area with a hypotension, low. Then you have to take an echo, identify it's an acute MR, and then the patient should be taken with diuretics and nitroprusside, taken for surgery. This is acute MR. The second one is a chronic MR, where there is, because it can be primary or secondary. Primary on the valve problem, secondary there is LV problem. This can be managed both medically and surgically. Surgically, when the LV is enlarged, the patient is having atrial fibrillation or a pulmonary hypertension, or the patient is having severe symptoms with a severe mitral regurgitation, then he can be taken up for surgery. A repair is done or replacement. I hope this helped you. Thank you. We can see till the next lecture. Thank you.